It's after 6 o'clock Central African time. We begin here this evening. South Africa's Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is hosting the South Africa Namibia Business Forum this coming Friday on the 17th of July at the Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand, Johannesburg. According to the DTIC, the forum forms part of the programme of the Binational Commission between the two countries and will bring together government and business representatives to engage and collaborate on efforts that will strengthen trade and investment. The theme for this gathering is driving regional industrialisation, investment and sustainable growth through strategic South Africa-Namibia partnerships. To give us a perspective on this, we joined this evening by Titus Nampala, CEO for the Chamber and National Planning Commissioner within the Office of the Namibian President. A very good evening to you and welcome to Africa in Business. Good to have you with us.
Good evening, Thami, and thank you for having me.
Perhaps let's start off with a bit of a background and an understanding of how this forum actually came to be.
Thami, I think this started from the BNC that was held between the two countries, which was hosted by Namibia in 2023, where the two presidents, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa and the former late president of Namibia, His Excellency Hage Geingob, had directed the two ministers of trade and industry to ensure that there is an establishment of the South Africa-Namibia Business Council. This was actually meant to serve as a public-private sector platform for coordinated and concerted actions. And we were supposed to have this in place already by last year. Obviously, there has been a lot of engagement and back and to and fro between the two countries. And I'm just pleased to note that now, about 3 years later, we are about to put pen to paper and really make sure that we continue working in a coordinated manner. Obviously, the two countries have a long shared history. I would almost go and say we are joined by the hip.
No, we certainly are joined by the hip. And I wonder, does this long-standing relationship and this history, does it make things easier when it comes to economic issues and forming then economic relationships between the two countries?
Certainly it does. Obviously, sometimes when the relationship is so good, you think you don't need to do anything else. But for those of us at the core phase, we do see that there is a need to improve. And sometimes it's just a question of sharing data, sharing information. Where are the challenges? Where are we doing well? Where could we improve? What could be done maybe more efficiently? And that's what we have been doing over the last 3-4 years. So there is a couple of items that we have identified that we think need action in a coordinated manner. Some of those things are already happening, but I think there is some that we can maybe put a little bit more energy into just to make sure that we are facilitating trade in an efficient and coordinated manner between our two sister countries.
Could you perhaps give a bit more detail around the details of this, binational commission, as well as some of the intricacies of this partnership and relationship? Some details.
Sure. I have a lot of details, so I'll see what I can pull out. But I think high level, it's really to ensure that we deepen cooperation between the two countries and attract private sector investment. Again, both in Namibia and in South Africa. Again, like I said, we have a shared history between our two countries, and there's things that we can probably start looking into in a more better coordinated manner, if you like. And one of those is really making sure that we are unlocking trade and investment. And what do we mean by this? You would have seen with some of our neighboring countries, specifically, say, Namibia and Botswana, where we have created an immigration, one border immigration post, where if you're going into Botswana as a Namibian or a Botswana going into Namibia, you only stop at one border. Now, we don't have that with South Africa, even though our history with South Africa is longer. And it's one of the things that we are trying to actually see how do we make that efficient to make sure that the movement of goods and people is more efficient And one of the things we are also looking at is in terms of movement of goods. Perhaps our two revenue agencies are talking to each other to ensure that maybe we pre-clear the goods in such a way that when a truck is coming from South Africa or it's coming from Namibia into South Africa, we don't necessarily need to sit at the border post and have those goods cleared, that you actually don't have what the immigration colleagues call no-stop border post.
I mean, what's quite interesting about the relationship between the two countries is that South Africa is Namibia's biggest source of imports, supplying almost 40% of all goods that are imported into Namibia. How can this relationship be improved, and how can Namibia also benefit from this relationship?
Indeed, Tami, I think, as Namibians, one of the things we are doing, and specifically as the Namibian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we are trying to see how do we enhance our trade, but also, as you mentioned, our trade deficit, where we import a lot from South Africa, and South Africa actually import from Namibia raw materials. Now, from a Namibian perspective, we obviously also want to increase our economic complexity, and we want to see how do we change our economy from being a consumption economy to one that also produce for our neighbors and our trading partners. So that's one of the things we are assessing, and that's why with this business commission, we're really looking also at seeing how the small and micro enterprises across our two nations, how can they tap into the value chains that already exist? Maybe the last thing I would say on this, Tami, is also that while we could look and say, okay, 40% of finished goods come from South Africa, but then it's a question of how do we create strategic partnerships between our two countries in such a way that even if we are getting the 40%, what does that mean for Namibian businesses and for those small and micro enterprises that want to tap into the technology that might exist in South Africa that we might not have, and vice versa? You would have seen last week as a country, or rather as the top leaders in government, we were in China. And I think it's really important that before we go far out, how do we actually enhance what we already have close by home?
Hmm. The public knows quite well about Namibia's fishing industry, as well as the diamond industry. But which sectors offer the greatest potential for stronger collaboration between Namibian as well as South African businesses, let's say over the next 5 to 10 years, specifically in the energy, agriculture, maybe even tourism, logistics areas?
I think you have covered all the major areas, but I think our industries are quite really closely linked. Whether it's those ones that are already enhanced, or you spoke about fishing, but if you think about fishing, there's so much value addition that can happen there, and manufacturing as well. So both from the fish itself as a product, but also from the ancillary products. So if you think about the tinning, the canning, the packaging, all of that speaks to manufacturing and industrialization. You spoke about agriculture, which is a really a broad sector. If we think about the meat sector, again, there's a lot of value addition that goes into there. And there are things that Namibia can learn from South Africa. There are things that South Africa can learn from Namibia. As we know, Namibia is the only country on the continent that can actually export meat to the US and to much of the EU because we are FMD free. So there are things that we can actually share with our South African counterparts. At the same time, if we think about the meat industry, there's a lot of value addition again in terms of skin, in terms of hoof, in terms of bones. So there's much that we can do in lengthening the value chains. Now, what we have seen is that specifically on the meat products, we export a lot of our animal on the hoof to South Africa. So we want to see how do we actually balance that. And then if we think about agro processing on the plant side, there's again a lot that we can share between our two countries. There are things that South Africa is very much advanced in. There are things that, as Namibia, we have done very well, specifically with table grapes and some other agro processing products as well.
Right. You mentioned value chains, and with the African Continental Free Trade Area gaining momentum, how can Namibia and South Africa work together to build those regional value chains and expand exports then to the rest of Africa?
Sure. So I think there's a very good complementary relationship between our two countries. One is obviously that in terms of operation, we are very much well integrated, but it also means that South Africa sitting at the very far end of the continent, and Namibia with its regional corridors and very well developed road infrastructure. I think for the last 5 6 years we have been voted as the country with the best roads on the continent. It really means that Namibia can then serve as that platform of South African products reaching the rest of the continent, especially when you think about Southern Africa and East Africa as well.
We'll leave it at that for this evening. Mr. Titus Nampala, CEO for the Chamber and National Planning Commissioner within the Office of the Namibian President. They're here in South Africa as the DTIC hosts the South Africa-Namibia Business Forum. Takes us to 22 minutes after 6.